print, email, Facebook, Twitter. More concerns for students with disabilities as national report reveals widespread bullying, assaults and suicide taunts. More than 56% of students with disabilities had experienced bullying over a 12-month period, a national survey has found. The survey, by Children and Young People with Disability Australia, revealed students experienced a range of bullying, including being punched, kicked, headbutted, cyberbullied, spat on and having food or rocks thrown at them. Some had been told to take their own lives. The Chief Executive of Children and Young People with Disability Australia, Stephanie Gottlieb, said the bullying could have ongoing negative impacts on the targeted students. This terrible bullying is really appalling, often involving physical assaults, threats, taunting, telling kids to commit suicide. Really, really appalling stuff that has very damaging psychological effects on the kids. Ms. Gottlieb said about 1/5 of the survey respondents also reported they had experienced restraint and seclusion at school. I've known kids that are put in a separate cupboard-like classroom and that's a regular part of their school. I know of one young student who was put in a separate portable classroom for months and months on end. Ms. Gottlieb said seclusion and bullying could harm the self-esteem and emotional well-being of children. If children with disability get embedded in them from the get-go that there's low expectations, they take on that there's low expectations for themselves. Their visions for their own futures are incredibly altered and damaged, she said. Pushed into the ground like any primary school student, 11-year-old Mimi Varazdi wanted to feel included in class and the playground, but often felt isolated and bullied. Mimi's mother, Valerie Varazdi, said her daughter had several disabilities, including an intention tremor which caused involuntary movements and affected her fine motor skills, speech and balance. If Mimi gets knocked she can't right herself or prevent herself from falling, she said. She had a run-in with some girls recently and ended up being pushed into the ground. To hold her down they proceeded to put their fingernail marks into her arms. The problem for Mimi is, and I'm sure it's the same for most kids with disabilities, if you're on your own and don't have friends or people looking out for you, it makes the world such a hard place because you need to deal with these things plus your body's limitations. Ms. Varazdi said Mimi was extremely social but had been excluded from some school activities. We found out she was actually being segregated from her class for the whole morning and would be watching her classmates from this room. There was no inclusion, and they then wonder why she might not be so zealous to do her work. Calls for urgent reforms. Ms. Gottlieb said major reforms in the education system were needed. I think the whole thing is snowballing and it's really now at a crisis where there is a critical and urgent need for reform for students with a disability. We need to look at better pre- and post-qualification training for all educators. At the moment, we constantly receive reports from families that teachers aren't resourced well enough, don't have the expertise required to meet the diverse needs of their students. Ms. Gottlieb said problems became further compounded for these children when their needs were not properly addressed. That's when we see this spiraling of issues. The victim becomes more and more unhappy and doesn't want to go to school, and the school response might be that the student doesn't belong here, she said. Mentoring program for children with disabilities. The federal government Department of Education and Training said it placed great importance on the health and well-being of all students, but it was up to state and territory governments, as well as non-government education authorities, to ensure anti-bullying strategies were in place in schools. In New South Wales, the Disability Services Minister, Ray Williams, said the government was considering a statewide mentoring program to help support students with disabilities and reduce bullying. Mr. Williams said the program was developed by a Western Sydney mum and involved Year 6 students becoming direct mentors to children with disabilities who are just starting school. There's a bit of safety and security in mentoring so that young child has that protector in the school, Mr. Williams said. Bullying the most vulnerable members of our society is just absolutely dreadful, and we know kids can be cruel sometimes, so we've got to work hard to do something to rectify that. If you can use leadership kids in the school to help solve that problem, I think that is a very powerful message. grassroots programs help promote inclusivity across Australia. A range of individual programs and initiatives are also underway to help improve the treatment and inclusion of students with disabilities. A children's book has been published about spinal muscular atrophy, SMA, a rare, genetic muscle wasting condition, to promote understanding and empathy. Finn Monroe, from Port Macquarie on the NSW Mid-North Coast, suffers from SMA and has donated a copy of the book to his school library, which is something his mother, Donna Liver, said was a positive step. Finn is the most fun-loving little boy you will come across, so for him to be included in playdates, birthday parties and outings is his dream, and we are working to make that a reality. At Coffs Harbour, on the Mid-North Coast, Robbie Veneziano and Jason Hay have been promoting inclusivity by teaching alternative sports that cater to all abilities in regional schools. Mr. Veneziano, who was born with short legs and without a left hand, said encouraging awareness and acceptance among children was a great starting point. Hopefully the next generation of adults will welcome more people with disability into work environments and into the mainstream. Instead of focusing on the individual, we are focusing more on the collective and getting them to accept and embrace disability. Once people with disability do walk out in public, if there's enough seeds planted in kids who have experience through our sports program, they will be more